My name's Tammy Medlin. I'm the local history librarian here at the Wilson County Public Library, and I'd like to welcome you to an interview with Mr. J. Robert Boykin III for our local history program this month. He's written quite a few books on local history and genealogy, and I helped with a couple of others, and I just want to take a look at them. We have the Episcopalians of Wilson County. We have the rise of a southern town, Wilson County, North Carolina. We have Wilson, North Carolina Historic Buildings Inventory. Wilson County, and this is one of my favorite books, Architectural Heritage, because it also gives like a brief history of each township and each town in Wilson County. We have Wilson County's founding families. He did the section on his family, the Boykins. And then we have the other one, if you've ever been in genealogy, this is usually what I'll start you off with. History of Wilson County, North Carolina, gives a brief history of different things that started the book, and then gives descriptions of important families, and people write about their own families, so he helped with that book as well. Now, this is my favorite one right here. This is Historic Wilson in Vintage Postcards. And we do have a copy. The other books here are in our genealogy section. They cannot be checked out. This one can be. We have extra copies of this one, and you can actually order this one off Amazon if you're interested. I met him because he's a member of the Wilson County Genealogical Society. And how did you get interested in genealogy?
First, thank you for having me here today. I would say that as a young child, I was very close to my grandparents who lived 4 houses from us, and they had old things, old letters and old books and things like that. So I used to go to their house and spend the night and read and what they had, and I always was intrigued by it. And I always in school did very well with history. I liked to read it and could just visualize, about the Revolutionary War or about World War I or World War II, and I just found it interesting to see the totality of what was going on at a given period of time, and just sort of just expanded from there. It was not a formal type of education that I got with it, but it was more informal and just sort of looking at it and trying to look at not just my own family history, but how those people who lived around me, how their family histories were, and how the community's family history was, and how they got to be here, and what they did for a living, and who they married, and all that kind of stuff. So it just sort of expanded from there.
Take the dates and everything out of it, and plug the people into it, make it real.
That's right. That's
okay.
Right.
Hey, I did the same thing. Now, what is the most memorable or interesting thing you have discovered researching either your family history or somebody else's? Something you did not expect to find?
Well, for one thing, what I've always been intrigued with, particularly on my postcard book, which my dad started sending me postcards. He worked on the tobacco market, and he would send postcards back to me, and I would be like in the 5th grade, 6th grade, and he would try to find old postcards of Wilson. At that time, most of them were current postcards of Wilson. This was back in the 50s, and he would, so I started keeping them and collecting them, and then started actively collecting postcards, and I started getting postcards that had buildings on them that we no longer had. And I think probably the most unusual postcard I found, I really got excited about this, and I've never seen another one like it. It was a postcard of the old train station, not the train station we have now, which was built in the 30s, but this was an earlier train station built in the 1890s. It was actually the most expensive postcard that I ever bought, and I hate to tell it, but I paid $400 for a penny postcard. So, but it is the only known photograph of that railroad station.
Is that in the book?
It is in the book.
Okay,
It is in
I'll
the
have to
book.
go through there and start looking for that Pacific one. And now, I know when I did my programs on the history of the library, I found out the library used to be over top of Woolworth's 5 and Dime. And that the only picture I found of Woolworths was in your postcard book.
Yeah.
So there are some photos in there, some information in there you're probably not going to find anywhere else. So it's highly readable, and I do suggest that book quite a few. When they come in and said, I want the history of Wilson, your book, and I'll admit it, is usually one of the first ones I grab.
Yeah, well, the postcard book is actually being sold currently in the Food Line grocery store, and so, around Christmas time they sell it at Walgreens, at the drugstores, and it's been reprinted 14 times since it was printed. And one interesting thing about that book is the first book that we used the word historic for the city of Wilson, and we titled it Historic Wilson in Vintage Postcards. And Wilson at that time was not leaning towards historic anything. Most people didn't think we had anything historic, but I had always believed we had a historic downtown and decided to use it in that book. And now they're using historic Wilson on a lot of things, which I think is good because it pulls in tourists and visitors and so forth.
How did you get the idea to write the book?
Well, I realized through the years that we were losing a lot of buildings that we didn't have photographs of. And one of the finest buildings we had was the Gold Professional Building, which was just behind the current courthouse downtown. And it was an outstanding building built in the early 1890s, and it was really a fine building, and they bulldozered it down. Now, we do have photographs of that building, but there are buildings around town that we don't have photographs of, and that was one reason I decided to go with that book. One disadvantage to the way that book is done is that all the photographs are in sepia tones, which is sort of all the same color type thing, but they're not in color. So some of those postcards in the reel are beautiful postcards and really pretty and in color. Now some of them are black and white, and some of them are in color. So a photograph to me is important, whether it's in color or not. If it's the only likeness we have of that building,
Exactly.
then it's important to have it. So that was one disadvantage with doing it the way I did it. All the postcards are sepia tones, and so the colored postcards are not in color.
Well, let me ask you this: do all the postcards belong to you?
All the postcards in the book belong to me, except for the trial, the murder trial of
The West Gang?
the West Gang, and this was in the early 1900s, and it showed the lawyers and the judge and those charged with the crime and all that stuff. All those postcards were sold to the public a long time ago, and they are very rare, and they were done by a professional photographer out of Lumberton that did those postcards. But they're the only postcards that I don't own.
Are you still adding to your collection?
I am. I still go to postcard shows, and I go on eBay. I go to antique shops that sometimes sell them, and anywhere I go to, I want to stop and look. And people ask my wife, doesn't that drive you crazy going with him to these postcard shows and looking at postcards all the time? And she said, look, he could be out there drinking heavy and dancing a lot. She says, let's just let him do his postcards. So anyway, she goes right along with it.
Okay. Well, now, a lot of people know you for the postcard book and know you for the Genealogical Society, but you were also, and this surprised me, you were a founding member of the Friends of the Wilson County Public Library. Can you tell us how that group was formed?
Well, that group is interesting. It was formed in 1979, and I had just gotten off the Wilson City Council. I had served, I think, 6 years on that, and I had always come to the library as a child. My grandmother would bring me, and sometimes my parents would come to the library, and I always thought it was was the most democratic place you could go in Wilson, because you'd see moneyed people and you'd see people without money. You would see everybody, because you could get a book and you could read it, and that was something that a lot of people did back then. And it was important to have your library card as a little boy.
That was a big deal.
It was a big deal. And so I decided, that's sort of my background with the library. Then all of a sudden, Woody Harrison, who was chairman of the library board at the time, and the librarian was Josie Thomason.
Mm-hmm.
They came to me and said, look, how can you help us with some things with the library, because we want to sort of market the library and promote it and this kind of thing. And I said, well, why don't you think about doing, a support group for the library called Friends of the Wilson County Public Library. And this was in 1979. In 1980, we had our first meeting in January of 1980, and so it's been going on since 1980, and they have really been supportive of the library in many, many ways, with speakers coming in and buying books and helping out where they need to help out and that kind of stuff. And that's exactly the whole purpose of what the Friends of the Library are all about. It's a good group. It's a very active group, and still active.
Yes, they sponsor the book sale, which is a big draw for us, especially when we have it now during the Whirligig Festival.
Yeah.
That's when we have our big one. So that's a big draw for us, get people into the library who usually might not come.
That's right.
Get them in that way. Now, what are some of the projects you were involved in, library projects, and which one was the biggest change for you? Which one are you the most proud of?
Well, I was involved in on a committee to get an area in the library designated for the genealogy section, and that was, I felt, was very important, because people, we needed to concentrate that material and it be in one place, and then if people wanted to do research and go find information on their families and that kind of stuff, they could just go in the genealogy room, however it was set up. And it used to be a little cove before the library was redone, and now it's in a private room that you can close the doors on, and it's large enough that you can have a small group meeting in there. And we got a lot of books in there, and we probably need more room. You would know that better than I do.
All right, I'll second that. I'll second that. We're gonna have to make some more room.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, two of the most popular things we have, so we're continually adding to them, is we are adding to the yearbooks, believe it or not, for Wilson County schools are popular, and the city directories, especially the old ones, are popular. So I want to make some more space on that bookshelf to keep adding to it. So this is a draw for anybody who has an old Wilson County high school yearbook, especially if a high school that's no longer there. Please call us. I would love to look at them if they're in good shape and you don't mind people reading what's written in the yearbook. Because back then, you're with me, they used to autograph the book and write things in it. We would definitely be interested in them. So next time you're cleaning out your attic, just let us know. Now, I know you're involved with some other historic preservation organizations. What are some of those, and what can you tell us about them?
Well, I've been active. When I was on the city council, we started the Historic Properties commission, which was to help designate historic areas and specific historic houses in the city of Wilson, which is still going on, doing well, and it has kind of matured and evolved, and along the way we developed a support system which is sort of like the Friends of the Library, but these are called, it is called Preservation Wilson, and they have a garden party every year to support funding to give to preservation projects and that kind of stuff. And I think history really is not a narrow scope, but it's a broad scope of things that include many things, and you have to look at everything that goes along with it. You just can't have a name and a date. It's more than that. These are human beings that we're dealing with, and so I was tutored under Hugh Johnston as a young person, and I took his North Carolina history class at Barton College, and he always emphasized, he says, history is all mixed together, and you can't have one aspect of it and play it up and deny the other. I said it's all one thing. So I sort of followed his philosophy and was very inclusive, because the city was very organized on some things, but the county was not. So with most of my family being from the county, because we've been here a long time, I wanted to include the county on everything. Same thing with the African American community. They have a rich, long history here, and I felt like that was important, that we needed to include everybody. Everybody's history is related to each other, and you just can't have one and not
the other.
Do the other. So I think Wilson, historically, of all the cities our size, we have as good a record, an outstanding record really on our community of being inclusive and everybody's history being well taken care of, very well taken care of.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming today. Is there any other organization you want to point out or talk about, or before we close?
I would say that I think it's important that as America's changing and we are evolving and more people are moving to other places and kind of stuff like that, that we need to maintain our historical societies really, because you can't forget the history. You can't forget your past. You don't. It's not always pleasant, but you don't want to ever forget even what was unpleasant about it, because you don't want it to happen again. And that's why I think that we can't just forget who we are and where we came from and who our neighbors were and how we worshiped and how we worked and what we did for fun and stuff like that. I mean, it's always, and I feel blessed in the sense that all my grandparents lived here, and 4 of my great-grandparents, I knew 4 great-grandparents, and all my grandparents all lived right here in Wilson County. So I had a rich history, oral tradition that I was around, that I thought everybody knew all their grandparents. Everybody knew all their great-grandparents, but they didn't. I mean, there's some people that don't even know who their grandparents are, and so that's why I think this is very important, really, for a healthy society to grow and to promote and encourage that. Don't forget the past.
Very well said, because what's the saying? And those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it.
That's right.
That basically sums it up.
That's right.
Well, thank you for coming today, and thank you for joining us for our interview with Mr. J. Robert Boykin III, and I'll see you next month.